Welcome to 104.3 ESPN Northwest Florida's new and exciting weekly radio show. A show focused on businesses in Bay and surrounding counties. Business Between the Lines is hosted by Christy Kirkland, a business accelerator with Answer Marketing, and co-hosted by Jason Price, a video guru with Riplify Media.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Christy.
And hey, everyone. Welcome back to ESPN Northwest Florida's Business Between the Lines show. We're back in the studio again today, and we have brought you a very exciting person. And when I tell you where he's coming from, you're going to be like, how is that exciting? Because Mr. John Byrne works over at Kent Forest Funeral Home and Cemeteries. He has been there since, I believe, 1977.
I'm sure he'll correct us if we're wrong.
Yeah. He has been a longtime mentor of mine, and he is really the type of person that comes to mind when I think about asking, what are some good advice tips? What would you tell somebody that's getting started, or what would you tell somebody that's really wanting to be successful in life? And the other day on Facebook, somebody had posted, what one thing, if you could go back and tell your younger self, what would it be? And a lot of the people that were answering this question were like in their late 20s, early 30s. And I was like, why are you saying go back and tell your you would be in
I remember back
diapers.
a couple decades ago, when I was 7 years old. And
Right. So it just doesn't wash when you think about it like that. But John comes to us with a wealth of background, and I couldn't think of anybody better when I wanted to talk about this subject of just giving yourself some helpful advice and everything. And he comes from such a variety in his background of all the things that he's ever done. And when I found out, this was quite a few years ago, that he was a well writer at one time, I'm just like, that in with everything else just makes him a very interesting guy.
Yeah.
So I can't wait for you guys to meet a very dear friend and a good mentor of mine, Mr. John Byrne with Kent Forest Funeral Home and Cemeteries. So don't turn that dial. We'll be right back with some helpful tips and some interesting conversation. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Christy.
Hey,
Hey,
John.
John.
Hey, Christy. Hey, Jason.
And everyone, welcome back to Northwest Florida ESPN, Business Between the Line. As promised, my very dear friend, Mr. John Byrne, and a lifetime for me mentor. It feels like sometimes we've known each other for quite a while.
We have.
But I cannot wait to hear what you have to say in this, because every time we have a conversation, I just sit there with my mouth open and be like, I think you know more than I've probably forgotten or have ever learned. And it comes out every single time we have a conversation. So hit us. Inspire us, motivate us, tell us what we need to know.
Well, that's always a good question. What do you need to know?
Right.
Everything, right?
Until you know.
Well, that's right. I thought it was interesting. I was listening to the intro, and I was thinking about Mark Twain, because everybody thinks about Mark Twain every day, I'm sure. But he said the perfect life would be able if you could start at 80 and go backwards.
Right? With all that knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, the Chinese say you don't attain wisdom till you're 80. And I'm still 2 years away. So I get smart one day.
So you're going to be even smarter in 2 years.
Yeah. I think, when you were asking me about 5 things, we may not have time for 5 things today, but...
Well, I start with 10, and I said, okay, I'll take 5, but
well,
I'll take whatever you give us.
Well, there's a lot. I think when you're young, a lot of people don't know what they want to do. Mm-hmm. They really don't. I can go around and talk to guys that are 40 years old now and ask them what they want to do, and they're still living in their mother's basement, and they still don't know what they want to do when they grow up. And yet there are kids out there every day. They grow up, they want to be a doctor, they want to be a lawyer, they want to be an accountant. And I didn't grow up knowing what I wanted to do, but I certainly grew up knowing what I didn't want to do. And I didn't want to be an accountant, and I didn't want to be an attorney, and I didn't want to be a doctor. I wanted to be the guy that hired attorneys, hired accountants, and hired doctors. That's who I wanted to be, right? But that's a journey.
Yeah.
That's a journey. So I think if you're young, if you can get focused earlier on what you want to do and have a path and
Right.
start working on that.
And that probably would help by just marking off the things that you you don't want.
Oh,
to
it-
just narrow it down.
It really does. Years ago, there was a guy by the name of Stephen Covey, wrote a book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yeah, and a good friend of mine, Bill Pedersen, the other day reintroduced me to that book, and I said, I got to go back and reread that thing. And one of the very first habits they came up with is being proactive. So being proactive means knowing what you want to do as soon as possible.
Right.
And the other key to that is, and probably the most important of all of them, is why.
Right.
Why do I want to do this? What is it that motivates me? What drives me? What doesn't? And as you go through life, there are different things that happen. When you're young and single, you got one thing on your mind. When you get married, you have a whole different thing. And when you have kids, it just goes
changes
on
again.
and on and on and on and on and on. But it's always the past lessons that you get to apply to those particular things.
Right.
I think back and I think maybe I wish I had read more. You know, read more poetry. That sounds stupid, I know, to some people, but
No, that was one thing that actually came up when I was looking at my reading list. I was like, I have no poetry books in here, so I actually put one on my Audible list the other day.
And that's the other thing. I was always people learn different ways,
Right.
right? People learn different ways. I'm a TV kid. I mean, you know, when I was 6 years old, we got the first TV in the neighborhood. My grandmother won it in a church raffle, right? And we lived in a 10-story apartment building in Newark, New Jersey. And my dad went up 10 stories, put an antenna on the roof, and those skinny little cables I had years ago that hooked up to your
Right.
TV, dropped it down 7 stories and ran it through our windows, past everybody else's windows. We got 4 channels.
Woohoo!
Woo!
Yeah.
But what happened is it makes you lazy
Yeah.
because you see things, you don't have to read things anymore. And so now I'm big on audiobooks,
Yes.
right?
I like
Because
all
I'm
this.
driving and I can be doing a book at the same time.
Right.
Well, I didn't have that back then, so then you had to force yourself to read. And gosh, it just took an inordinate amount of time. I mean, it does. And so that's why people don't read as often as they ought to, but they really should. And if you want a tip, we were talking about poetry. I've got a tip for everybody. Go on Google and Google the word if. And it's a poem written by Rudyard Kipling. And if you will read that, I used to carry it in my pocket. When I was a young sales guy, I carried it in my pocket. And I would take it out and I would read it probably every day.
I think you read it to the A-team one
I
time for an
did.
educational moment.
And I had it memorized, and now I'm, you know, I have to remember my name. My tag is upside down, you know, so I can remember who I am. But it started out, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you and make allowances for their doubting too. But it goes on stanza after stanza after stanza,
Right.
and every one of those things will apply at some juncture, a time in your life.
Right.
And if you've got it to pull out at that moment, you'll understand, you know, if you can treat with triumph, if you can treat triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. You know, there's just so much in there, and I suggest that. And the other one, as far as poetry goes, was written by the same guy, and it's The Gods of the Copybook Headings. Another great thing to write, and if you read it in context of what we're doing now, it's a whole different thing. I mean, years ago I cared more about Animal House than I did Animal Farm. but Animal House is a movie, as everybody knows. But Animal Farm was a great, great book. Orwell wrote that, and he also wrote 1984. And if you took the time to read those today, you would go back and you go, oh my God. And everything that's going on today, you would see that guy had figured out back in the 50s. Unbelievable. So I don't know how much time we have left for this or what we're
I don't know
working on
either.
here.
We have
We got
about
3 minutes?
6 minutes.
3 minutes, 6 minutes?
About 5 minutes or so.
About 5 minutes. Well, some other things that I think about is, you know, I wish I'd studied the Bible a little more younger. I've studied it a lot in my old age because there's a tremendous amount of wisdom
Right.
within that book. Interestingly enough, within that book, when you talk about the word wisdom, it's always in the feminine. Did you know that? Always
No.
always in the
I
feminine.
didn't know that.
Wisdom is always referred to as she, her.
Her.
Yeah. So that's just another little thing. And of course, yes, when you're young, you kind of take things for granted.
Yes, you do.
I mean, when I think back on my life, I've been blessed beyond all reason.
Right.
Have I worked hard? Yes, I have. Have I taken time to study and learn things? Yes, I have. I always hung around with people who were older than me.
Right.
And I don't mean like 10 years older, I mean 15, 20 years older, because I wanted to know what they knew back when I was 18, 19, or 20. But you've got to learn to be appreciative for the things that you have. And when you're young, you know, everything just, for a lot of us, everything came pretty easily.
We had that conversation that one time, and you said, and you actually told the A-team that one time, you're like, you know, what is the one thing that people at the end of their lives say, oh, I wish I had done more of? And it definitely wasn't work more and earn more money and all of these things that people are chasing after and trying to pursue. It was like, I wish I had went on more walks. I wish I would have enjoyed family a little bit more. I wish I would have slowed down enough to hear what my grandchildren were saying to me.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you go back and you look at those, you look at those particular things. I've got one hand as far as money making goes, though.
Okay.
I know that's important to people, you know. But learn to have multiple streams of income in your life. Multiple streams of income. Everybody's
even
got
now, like all the YouTuber financial people all talk about that every day too.
Multiple streams of income, not just that, not the one focus that you do, not this thing that gives you money today to do the things you want to do later, but have multiple streams of income. That would be my best tip financially.
Yes, that
Awesome.
is a good one.
So that's the end of our time. I can almost guarantee you guys that John will be back eventually on another episode, because I think he only got through like 0.2% of what he had prepared. So guys, stay tuned. Christy and I are going to be right back to kind of unpack a little bit more on what it was that John was just talking about, because it's super helpful for all of us. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Live and local sports, high school sports, college football, the NFL, the Atlanta Braves, the Dan Patrick Show, The Herd with Colin Cowherd, the James Hale Show, the Coach's Daughter Show. Sports, we cover it all. 104.3 ESPN Northwest Florida.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Christy.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm so glad you stayed with us. John Byrne.
That was so good.
Is awesome. He is just a wealth of knowledge, and I don't think you can't even count like that much, like a small little tidbit of the knowledge that we pulled out of what that man
I think
holds.
I was right when I said it was like 0.2 or 0.02% of what he wanted to share is what we got to share.
And that's not even a 0.02 of what he has in him.
But I love, like, any chance I get to talk with somebody who knows more than I do about whatever it is, it's always really good. But the really cool thing about John is not only does he have a wealth of knowledge and he's really wise, or he said he's two years away from
2 years away
wisdom.
from being wisdom.
But what's cool is he also has this perspective of having several decades more than any other of my mentors.
Right.
So like he's like, I've lived through like one like stage of life. Like I went through adolescence and I'm right at the beginning of this whole adult thing. And he went through like adolescence and adult and then midlife and then like being a parent and being a grandparent and being retired and then still working. And he has all these different like
Jason's
pools
still
that he
learning
pulls
what
from.
it means to be adulting.
I'm still figuring that one out.
Once you get some kids, and we'll talk again.
Okay.
No, but we definitely will have to have him back on the show. He has a lot of information in him, and it comes from all of those experiences that he has under his belt. And I love that he referenced that poem. So you really, I don't know if he said it very clear. Yeah, but if you type in Google poem and then the word if, it is a Rudyard Kipling. That's the name of the guy that wrote it.
Okay.
It's just got a lot of little, insightful pieces into it that,
I've
like
heard
he said,
him read it, but I've never
Yeah,
read it
pulled it
myself.
out of his
But it
pocket
must be good if
before
he used to
he
hold
kept
it on his person all the time.
Right. And the other one that he referenced was the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. That one is another winner of mine, another favorite of mine. And I've got it hard copy, and I do have it on Audible.
I think I have it on Audible, but I haven't ever actually read it.
Yeah.
I know I need to.
It is definitely one of those books that I use it both. It's nice to have books like that you can just glean information, you hear it over and over, and stuff starts to sink into you. But it is definitely one of those ones that you need to have a notepad and be reading it and making your notations and stuff. I am a bookmarker upper. I will buy more than one hardcover book or flimsy cover book, and one is for reading, and one is
For marking up.
for
That's
marking
funny.
up, and
That's
it'll have
funny.
tabs and highlighters, and yeah.
I read way fewer books than I listen to, but I too, whenever I'm reading a book, I always have it so I can underline stuff and circle it, and
Yeah.
makes it a lot easier. Especially if I'm like doing like a book study with someone. Then if I see something, I want to make sure I tell that person what I got from it, then I'll mark it up a bunch.
Yeah, my leaders group, we actually started a library, and what we're doing is in the book, like if I read it, I mark it up only like in a blue highlighter. And then like if Karen takes the book next and she's reading it, her highlighter will be yellow, and we make notes at the very end. I've got like a little
Like a legend thing of
I've got
yellow
like 3
means-
sheets like hooked into the back of the book, and I write my notes, my thoughts on it, my summary, and then she writes hers, and we just keep passing it on. And then
That's so cool.
after like 6 or 7 people, I can go back and I can look at their highlights and just kind of see it in a different perspective.
Yeah.
And stuff. But yeah, that's a kind of a neat little thing that we just
That's pretty
started.
cool.
But no, we had him on the show, Mr. John Byrne, to talk about what he would, tell his younger self, and he came back with some really good ones. And I'm just curious, Jason, in your age and wisdom.
I've got a little bit over a quarter century
Right.
on this planet. I've learned
Is
quite
there something that just kind of stands out in your mind that maybe at this point in your life that you're like, man, if I'd have just known that 10
Yeah.
years earlier?
I think the biggest thing for me is, and I still struggle with it now, is whenever I was younger and still little now, whenever I'm speaking with someone, especially in the business community, when I'm around people who are older and more successful and wiser than I am, and I will try to put off this version of myself that seems older, that seems wiser, that seems smarter.
Right.
I'll kind of talk and speak and act as if I have a lot more of my stuff together than I
Right.
actually do.
Right.
And it's like for the longest time I cared, and still sometimes do care more about how people perceive me, and I'll put work into changing their perception than
Right.
I will on just making myself a better person.
Right.
Like instead of focusing on, well, I need to be wiser, I want them to think that I have a lot of wisdom.
Gotcha.
I think that's my biggest one.
Everybody wants to be respected and stuff, but I think when we put on that air of, hey, I've got it all together, you miss out on some of the advice and the stories that other people would share if they thought you might benefit from it.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking to someone like, I think with John Byrne, I'm like, what could I possibly say that would ever benefit him? But we've had some amazing conversations, and he's like, the most inspiring thing he's ever said to me was, I'll have to remember that and put that into practice. So
Wow.
we can learn from anybody, no matter what
Yeah.
their
And
age
if you
level.
put off
their-
this like aura of like, well, I've got my stuff together, I'm wise, I'm smart, all this stuff,
Right.
then someone like John Burton that has so much to share might just kind of pass you up because they're like, well, that person, they're not going to be able to listen to what I've got to share.
Right.
They're going to go to the person who's hungry to learn and to try to learn more.
Right. So don't be afraid
Yeah.
to put yourself out there and show. I mean, none of us know it all. If
Yeah.
you think you do, I'd love to have you on the show and prove you wrong. No, I'm kidding. It is definitely one of those, we're always learning, and you should want to always learn something new
Yeah.
every day. And I actually go all out, and I'll post sometimes on Facebook, and I'll be like, I was this years old today when I learned
Yeah.
XYZ, whatever it is. And
Uh-huh.
it's like, did you know that tab was for this, or whatever the epiphany is that you get. I have no problem putting it out there and being like, I just learned this today. I'm sure some of you already know it, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of like, I'm going to kick you when I find you because you didn't tell me and I had to learn it. No. It is definitely, we all need to learn something. So don't put the airs on, don't put the
Yeah.
attitude that that you know it all, or don't be afraid to let people know that you are hungry for information
Yeah.
and that you don't know it.
So you and I have had countless conversations where I've asked you like, okay, I need help with this. I need help with this. So I mean, the same thing that you asked me, like, what is something at the beginning of your business or earlier on in your career where you're like, if I would have known this thing then that I know now, what would you?
I don't know if it would be so much as a thing as an action.
Okay.
So I would say if right now, whenever I try something new, it makes me feel so alive. Like, we tried a mud run not too long ago, and I've been watching it, and I researched it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's going to kick my butt. And I could have said, no, I'm not quite ready for that yet. But instead, I was like, you know what? You only live once. Jump out there. And I want that attitude when I was younger. And I know some people do have it when they're really young and they're like that no fear thing. But I'm talking about like when you get to that stage where you're in relationships and you're looking for your career and stuff like that, to not be afraid to try it all. You don't have to know it all. You don't have to. You can be 80 years old and still be figuring out life. That is okay. There's no rule that says when you reach 30 years old, you got to have your stuff together. Yeah. No. I'm like, I reinvent myself all the time. And I think I would have had more experiences in life. I have a lot of them, but I would have had more. And that concept of just try it all. Don't be afraid. And it's like, that might not be for me. How do you know till you try it? Yeah. We tell our kids that all the time. They look at the green stuff on their plate and they're like, yeah, I'm not eating that. And you're like, how do you know if you don't try it? You're telling your kid, you do it.
Yeah.
You try something new that you've never tried. We went on a cruise back before the world shut down. and each port that we were at, they would have this cuisine that was to that region.
Yeah, that's cool.
And the first time I looked at it, there was ox tongue. Trying to remember some of that, but there's some crazy stuff on there. And I was like, oh, that is not for me. And I had that I was like, you know what? Bring it here. I will try it. I'm going to try it once. And I had some of the most amazing meals. And I was like, I would have never thought that would have taken. It was so moist and savory, and
but you're
you
just
like,
right?
I don't know if I can. And it goes back to that show that we had about the oyster.
Oh
right?
Yeah, love oysters. But who is the first person to go and try an oyster?
About food.
We do always talk about food. Oh man! All right, so we're out of time. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this week's episode. John did a phenomenal job. I don't know when he'll be back, but I can guarantee he'll be back eventually. Huge shout out to our amazing sponsors, Vortex Spring, Highland Finance, and Aero Pest Service, who make this show happen. If you've got something where you're like, man, I wish I would have known that whenever I was younger, you've got these pro tips, these amazing things that all of our guests have been able to share, and you'd like to be a guest on our show or you know somebody who would, then message us on our Facebook page, Business Between the Lines. We'd love to have you on. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you next Sunday.
Thanks for listening to Business Between the Lines. Join us every Sunday morning beginning at 8 on 104.3 ESPN Northwest Florida.